We're having a few challenges, sorry, so we're just starting a bit late. It's been a bit of a crazy day. So we can see that like our invites went out a bit early and and then and then we're having a problem with emails going to spam, but at least you guys got through. So we'll just send around the replays. So I've been spending most of today sitting on social media, and I must say that I don't know how people do it full time. So social media management is not my specialty, that's for sure, and I just don't know how people do it all the time. So anyway, yeah, so I've got like another day and a half of social media, and then I'll be very happy to not look at social media for a little while. But anyway, so thanks for joining me. What I wanted to do is just go through a few things with you today. And then, like always with our weekly workshops, I'll send round a replay and lots of links for this, but it has been a long time coming. Yeah, so let's get started. So I mean, most of you I know, so we won't go through this. And again, I think I know all of you, so I probably don't need to do the introductions, but for the replay, I just want to say that, you know, I've been working with startups and scale ups since 2006. Had experienced two successful exits, Love Film to Amazon and Funding Circle to the LSE IPO. And then created Fast Growth Consulting since 2019. And so working with a team, which half of the team's here, working with a team to support founders in seed and Series A fundraising. And obviously the book launch is today, so that's been quite exciting. And then I also have Financial Leadership Foundation, so similar name to the book, where I train new and aspiring finance directors in this space. So today I just wanted to go through some challenges that we kind of find in this industry specifically. A bit about the book that has been written, essentially. The FLF framework that we use both when I'm teaching, but also in Fast Growth Consulting. So we also have a framework. We use the same one, essentially. And just a bit about that financial leadership. So, you know, the main challenges that I find with finance leaders, particularly in startups and scale ups, is the fact that you're always drowning in a huge task list. Even as a fractional CFO, and both Christy and Sadaf can attest to this, is sometimes you can really just drown in the firefighting in the day-to-day. And it's harder to think a bit more long-term, be more strategic. So particularly when you're in the office and you have people coming to your desk all the time. As a new leader, sometimes you feel that weight of proving your worth. So there is an element of imposter syndrome. There is an element of confidence. I think largely we're female women on this group on this call. It's also it's better now, but it's still very much sometimes you can be the only woman in the leadership team. I know with some of the fractional work we do, the entire leadership team is male, and so sometimes that can be a bit confronting. There's also not a huge amount of training relevant to the startup world. So if you think about, say, your qualifications, it's very audit, tax, large corporation, listed entity training. It's not really, you don't really learn about fundraising when you're doing your qualification. And also there are other CFO kind of courses around. Grow CFO is probably the most popular in the UK. They are, again, very focused on large corporations. So I know, for example, when they talk about finance tech stack, they're often talking about Microsoft. None of my clients in the startup world have Microsoft. They're all on Google because it's cheap. So, you know, it sometimes can be really difficult. The other challenge is also you don't have a HR or L&D function in your company. I mean, you may have a small one, but often if it's very small, you are, and payroll and everything sits under you. And also you don't get that kind of in-house mentor. If you have a mentor outside the company, great, but often you won't have a mentor within the company that you can lean on, like you do in accounting and audit, and like you do in a large corporation. And then another challenge I find, which not everyone always thinks about, and actually this came to me as a realization quite late when I was writing the book, and I had to go back and add it in, is that you are often working with a first-time founder. So not only is you potentially, but if this is your first time leadership role, you are working for someone who's never been a CEO before. And that creates a lot of challenges because they are often looking to you to help them with something that neither of you have potentially done before. Or they don't actually know how to utilize you properly. And they may find themselves doing some of the CFO work when actually they've got an expert in-house to do it. So sometimes, the challenges of working with a first-time founder is quite big. I certainly find working with second, third-time founders so much easier. I can already think of a second-time founder that's just a breeze to work with. So this is also an additional challenge. So as I kind of mentioned, that that jump from management to leadership is much bigger than a jump from unqualified to qualified accountant, just because there's no program to follow. There's often no mentorship framework, and also the leadership skills has a lot to do with mindset. There's a different way of thinking. You're having to use a lot more softer skills, communication, long-term planning, and you are thinking and looking at things quite differently. It's just not a matter of getting through all of the task list. So as I said, there's not often a mentor available. So this is why, this is one of the reasons why I wanted to write this book and why I have the course, essentially, is to provide the skills and the tools for new and aspiring CFOs. The other thing that I really struggled with as well is when I first became a finance director, and this book is full of my mistakes, is that you don't have a task list. So when you're in a more management role, say a financial controller or an FP&A manager, you know what your task list is. You come in, you do your monthly, your quarterly, recurring tasks. But when you're finance director, CFO, there is no task list. You are expected to create that task list. And if you haven't done it before, that actually is quite daunting. So what I've done in this, and obviously we're doing the course as well, is we have a task list at the end of every single chapter. So you kind of can take that away and put that into your role. And then, within this whole thing is that the nuances of working in a startup or scale up. Again, you're working with a first-time founder, you're constantly in fundraising mode, and you are also dealing with not much cash flow, which is also a bit challenging. And you may also be the only person in the finance function, or you'll have one junior and that's it, or one bookkeeper and that's it. So there's also a real challenge. I wrote this book for me. So I wrote it for me that I wanted to have 15 years ago. So I did really struggle when I first became a finance director in that first, I'd say, 18 months. And I basically wish I had something like this to kind of help me in that role, essentially. So yeah. So I'll probably say this a few times, and we'll certainly send you the links or drop them in the chat. But for today and tomorrow only, the Kindle version is available on Amazon for just 99p. So if you wanted to download that today or tomorrow, then you get it at a great price. So we'll drop the link in, as I said, we'll drop that in the chat and also in the replays, so you can download that today. And then also, we also are going to have a kind of like a giveaway in April. So again, we'll drop this link as well, and also in the replay. But I'm kind of wanting to encourage people to review on Amazon. So if you're able to do a review sometime in April and upload a copy of your review in this link, then we have a prize draw where I'll give away one of the course for the first prize, and then second prize is we'll give some pretty heavy discounts that can be used on any of our courses. So if that is, if that sounds like something you would like to do, then feel free to click on that link and leave a review for me on Amazon. That'd be amazing. Thank you. So anyway, so this is the Financial Leadership Fundamentals Framework. As I mentioned, I go through this in the book. This is in the introduction. I also go through this with all of my students, and the bottom 4 is what we go through when we work with our founders. And sometimes we would spend up to 6 months on keeping the lights on. We've got one large client at the moment, and that's exactly what we're going to be doing before we can start upgrading and then really moving into value adding and strategy. So I wanted to go through each of these 5 elements of the framework today and kind of give you an insight as to what I kind of talk about both in the book and the course, so you can see, a general flavor essentially of what I go through. I go through one element of each of these 5 parts when I do workshops as well. But obviously I can only go so deep in 30 minutes. So anyway, so this one is quite relevant, seeing we've got a lot of women on the call. But sometimes you find that you don't have, it sometimes can be difficult to really find your voice in a board meeting, particularly when you're not the commercial person, even though ideally you should be quite commercial. So I've certainly been in situations exactly like this one where people only give me 30 seconds to talk about management accounts, when actually there is a lot of insights, is a lot of information that could be really useful for the business. So it's getting from just doing a quick 20-second run through of what happened last month or what happened in the audit to really being part of that conversation. So thinking about leadership as a role, Indra did a great quote, and she said, leadership is hard to define and good leadership is even harder. So it's not, you don't just learn what it is and then run with it. I'm always learning about leadership, and I'll probably will be for the rest of my life. But essentially, if you can get people to follow you to the end of the earth, you are a great leader. So it is getting people to work with you towards your vision, essentially. So when I'm thinking about leadership, these are probably the 3 skills that I think about the most. Obviously, there's more to it, but these are 3 non-negotiables, essentially. The first one, which I potentially think is the most important, is communication. So communicating with your team, with your peers, with external parties, with the leadership team, with the founder, with the board, with the investors. There's a lot of people that you have to develop really strong relationships with, and not only the company, but also a network and having a black book and, related parties that you can lean on outside the company all the time. So developing those relationships do take a really long time, and it's one thing at the early stage of a leadership career. It can be really difficult because you're having to break in and develop those relationships, and they take time. It's worth saying communicating is also listening skills is a big part of communication. I know, if you've been doing a leadership role for a while, you may have noticed that sometimes you feel like a therapist, particularly with the leadership team. So I know at Funding Circle, I was the leadership team's therapist at some stages. There was a few people that kind of leaned on me a little bit, largely because I stay out of politics. So they just needed someone to talk to. So there is an element of that. And sometimes that can become a bit much just because you see how everything fits together. You own payroll, essentially your team owns payroll, and you have to keep secrets. And so everyone kind of thinks that, therefore you can be their therapist. So it's kind of a fine line sometimes. But as I said, sometimes, doing small pieces of that helps you develop those relationships. The next big one I find is strategy. So, leaders really need to think long term. Thinking back to that original comment of fighting fires all the time and looking at your task list, if you just do that all the time, doesn't matter how well you communicate, you're not going to be a great leader. You do need to think about things long term. The difference between thinking long term in a startup and thinking long term in a large corporation is you have to be incredibly flexible. Things can change really quickly. You have to be able to pivot quite quickly with the business. So, which is quite different. You can't really be stuck in the mud. Rolling forecast versus annual budgets is a perfect example of having that flexibility, but being much more longer term. So one thing you do also need to think about is mitigation. So planning for different scenarios, option A, B, C, and D. What happens if this happens? You probably spend a lot of time doing that as well, and going back to the drawing board and again and again and again. So it is quite a different beast when you're thinking about it from startups and scale-ups, but it's incredibly important. And actually, this is the bit that you'll spend most of your time speaking to the founder about. And then the next one is development. So leaders need to be really great at self-development. So never stop learning and improving. I know for me personally, once I had become qualified and then I moved to the UK, I wasn't particularly interested in doing any self-learning. I think also because I had to learn so much about new culture, new business, new tax rules, new, blah, 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 blah. And I probably spent too long not doing self-development. I quickly saw the area in my ways and I had to play a bit of catch up. So learning and self-developing never stops. Even if you're a CFO, it actually probably you probably need to do more and more. So never forget that just because you're qualified, you just can't stop self-learning. Not only yourself, but also your team. So your team, if you want to, particularly with these younger generations, if you want to have a team that really believes in you and stays with you, essentially, you need to really care about their career and their career development. And you need to be involved in that. And also it's understanding where they want to be in a couple of years' time so that you can hopefully help build them to get to where they want to go. Obviously, people do move out a lot more. I mean, London's quite movable anyway, but the younger generations are changing jobs a lot more quicker. So sometimes it is difficult to see people moving in and out of their roles all the time, and you've spent so much time developing, but that's just the nature of it. So you really do, and it does come around eventually. If you treat people well, you'll definitely hear again. So development's incredibly important, both for yourself and for your team. Leadership is inspiring people. Management is keeping the trains running on time. So again, often I've talked about the difference between, well, explaining what leadership is by comparing it to management. And this is like a good summary of the difference between the two. So I quite like this quote as well. All right, so that's a kind of a taster of leadership and mindset. The next one is keeping the lights on. So quite like this one. I have 100% made this mistake before. So, I we have got a client that's been with us for about 15 months now, and we're probably going to be preparing for a Series A at the end of the year. And when I spoke to the founder 15 months ago, the reason why they spoke to me is because they said they had a fractional CFO. He was really good on strategy, but every time he sent out the management accounts, they didn't believe the numbers. And this is a perfect example. And so that he lost his job because of that. And so that's obviously I don't put that one in the book, but that is a perfect example of why the baseline and the foundations of the finance function is really, really important. You can't get the trust from the leadership team and the founder and the board and the investors if your foundation isn't right. And you also can't really do the analysis on the top of bad numbers. So I basically said this. So it really does affect everything you do. So if you're doing a budget and the historics don't make sense, if you are doing an analysis on different types of scenarios, but you're basing it on numbers that don't make sense, you're not going to get what you want to get. It's that short-term pain, long-term pain. And as I said, half of the appointments that we get as fractional CFOs is because of baseline issues. It's because the founders have just had enough. So it really shows that it doesn't matter if you are a finance manager or a CFO. It is still really important to get your numbers right. You can't ignore it when it's a CFO, otherwise you get into a world of problems. Maintenance and reporting. So, it's probably worth saying, what is the one output that is seen by the founder and the board and the leadership team every single month? Is obviously the management accounts. And if you've worked up through industry from finance manager, from financial controller, you're probably a little bit sick of the management accounts, and you've probably sometimes, maybe not now, but sometime in your career, just kind of pulled them together and spat them out just to get them done, and you just go through the motions every single month. Unfortunately, this really works against you. And if you think about all the other leaders or junior leaders, shall we say, throughout the business, they don't have this opportunity. They don't have the opportunity to demonstrate their skills and communicate to the founder and the board and investors and the leadership team every single month. You're one of the only people in the business that gets this opportunity. Doesn't matter if you're a financial controller or a CFO. And so therefore you can't really dial it in. So it gives you the opportunity to really demonstrate your skills. So you can, talk about the pros and cons of this week. You can do spotlight trends. You can give an analysis of what you think the future is going to be based on the history. You can talk about the trends that are looking amazing and potentially you could encourage the business to review and see it as an opportunity. Or the opposite, you can say, oh, look at this trend, this is concerning, is this something that we need to address? So it gives you the opportunity to have those strategic conversations. And ideally, when you're going through the management accounts and preparing the management accounts and sending them out with commentary that's really insightful and doesn't just state what the numbers are saying, you are starting a conversation, you are demonstrating that you're a leader and highlighting your skills, and and you're also going to get the trust of the business. And people will start wanting you to be part of the conversation as far as commercial strategy, business decisions. So this is why management accounts are super important. I actually have a small course just on the management accounts, and I usually chuck that in with the main course because it is just so important. The reporting framework, this is a reporting framework that we go through. Cash flows is obviously one of the most important parts of a startup, which is again different from a large corporation because cash runways is often a problem. And so trying to work out how to manage the cash flows, how to improve the cash flows through working capital, through your cash conversion cycle, and essentially improving, giving the insight and the comfort that the founder needs is really important. The management accounts, obviously, so baseline, consistency, the structure, spotlighting changes, being insightful. That's kind of the next stage. Then it's looking KPIs and metrics. So there's a huge amount of piece on that, looking at consistent definitions, making sure they're aligned to the OKRs and business goals, measure them regularly, obviously, and then just chart, because it's the easiest way to communicate. And then finally, it's the reporting. So not just the management accounts, but it's also reporting to the business partners, matching their OKRs with what you have found, showcasing your findings, and then obviously feedback and follow-up. So this is the detailed reporting framework that I go through in both the course and the book. So then the next one of the framework is adding value. So this is another way that we look at how to add value in the business. So not only looking at it from a finance perspective, but also looking at it from a business perspective. So you need to do both. You can't just do one or the other. So the first one is assessing it. So looking at your current task list, looking at your current things that are in your awareness, and working out, this is particularly if you have overwhelm, working out, categorizing within control, if you have full control, indirect control, and no control. And then this is also similar to your Eisenhower matrix, which I've also talked about as well, very similar. You essentially, anything you control, you do quickly. Anything with indirect control is where you should be spending most of your time as a leader, because indirect control means you need to be with your business partners, you need to be with the leadership team, you need to be out there influencing essentially in your area. And then anything you have no control, you look at things as far as mitigation is concerned. Then it's automation and optimization. So this is, again, particularly in the finance function, you want to automate and optimize what you can, but also you want to have that challenge with the rest of the business. So one question I always like to say is, if the business doubled in size, as a lot of startups can, would your current finance processes, would your operations team, would your delivery team, would all of those things still work if the business was twice the size? And if you start at that, then it's very easy to see where your weak points are. And generally it's because things are very, very manual and you've just been throwing people at the problem. So looking to automate and optimize what you currently have so that you can meet that level of demand. And then feedback's a big part of it. So feedback both from your business partnerships and for you personally, but it's also feedback or revision rather of what's working and what's not working. So it's a way of thinking about how you can work with the business. And then finally, strategy. So a big part of strategy, and this is, the vision, mission, strategic goal, operational goals, and budgets is a big part of what a first-time founder sometimes may struggle with. I have worked with founders where they have an MBA, so they're very good at this stuff, but plenty that don't, basically. And so they really struggle with this basic concept. I find most founders have a vision and a mission, or one or the other, or both. And they usually set that up at the beginning, just because, if you ever pick up a book that says how to start a business, it always talks about the vision and mission. But what I often find that founders might be lacking is in number 3 and number 4. And that is the strategic goals and the operational goals. So if you don't know what the strategic goals are, then it's very important to talk with the founder to find out what they are. They may have them, but just haven't communicated them. So encouraging the founder to communicate them if they do have them. If they don't have them, then it's probably worthwhile working with them to find out where we want the business to go. So sometimes the best way to start that conversation is, when are you planning on exiting, and what sort of business do you envisage having when you exit, and then working backwards from there. The operational goals is the one that, if 1, 2, and 3 are in existence, the operating goals is the one that you probably will be the most heavily involved in. And that is setting quarterly goals to make sure that each department hits those strategic goals. So it's all well and good saying in 2 years' time you want to have, say, 1 million subscribers. But how are you going to get there? So what are you going to do to get to your strategic goals? So this is where there needs to be a lot of discussion, a lot of planning, a lot of involvement from the entire leadership team on all the different things, all the quarterly or semi-annually projects that need to happen in order to hit those strategic goals. So you see them as a staircase up to there. And that is what's really important. And then once you've got all of those things, then you can do a budget. So, and the budget is there to check the financial validity of the operational goals. So if there aren't any operational or strategic goals, it's very difficult to do a budget without them, because you're not really aligned. So that, this is a lot of work, but that essentially is a high level overview of one of the elements of strategy that I go through, and that's a strategic vision and getting down to budget ultimately. So anyway, so the thing that I wanted to go through as well is that these are a lot of the things that you need to think about, and these are some of the mistakes that I find when I'm working with early stage leaders, is ignoring the baseline, just fighting fires and just focusing on short term, staying silent, so not having those conversations, not using their voice within board meetings, not having those business partnerships. Sometimes confusing startups with a corporate or audit environment, particularly if you're moving into the startup environment, it is very different. And then also understanding the skills of the founder. Not all founders know what they're doing either. So it's like just being aware of that. So because of all of this, obviously, I wrote the book and created the course. I'll probably just a quick run through the course. It's the same thing as the book. It's just in a lot more detail, and it goes through the how-to. And it's lots of templates, lots of Q&A sessions with myself, and the goal really is for everyone that works with me, they become a confident, skilled finance leader that fully supports the CEO and the board within 12 months. So that's how we kind of build that. And so some of the feedback that I've received just from the courses, Suzanne came to me, she didn't really understand what a finance director did. And then after the course, she's like, oh, I actually know how to do all of these things. I didn't know that this is what a finance director did. She, uses all of the actions, and she's now a finance director and comfortable in her role. And then Lukash was the same. He was working as a group financial controller, wanted to go to that next step, but didn't really understand the role. So he has a better understanding of that now, and just found it very easy to go through the course because you can do it at your own pace. So anyway, so as I mentioned, today and tomorrow only, you can download this on Kindle for 99 cents or 99p. So again, we'll send out the links for that if it's not already in the chat, so you can download that. And then we do have this giveaway that has got all of the these prizes that we'll do a draw on the 1st of May. So if you're interested, please just leave a review on Amazon, any Amazon, it doesn't matter, doesn't have to be the UK, and then use this link to upload your review, and then that would be amazing. Okay, as I said, I know all of you quite well. So if there, and you know, I know a couple of you are on the workshops that I do each week quite often. So I don't know if there are any questions at all, but feel free to unmute yourself and ask any questions if you have any at all. Okay, thanks, Emma. No, cool. All right. Well, thanks to the few of you that were able to get through. So hopefully our workshop tomorrow morning won't be as full of errors that we've had today. But thanks so much for joining me. I really appreciate it. And I look forward to hearing about what you think. Thank you.
Thank you, Alicia.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Elena.
Congrats on the book.
Thanks.
Bye. Bye.
Thanks.